You will hear a number of different recordings and you will have to answer questions on what you hear. There will be time for you to read the instructions and questions, and you will have a chance to check your work. All the recordings will be played once only. The test is in 4 sections. At the end of the test, you will be given 10 minutes to transfer your answers to an answer sheet. Now turn to Section 1. Section 1. You will hear a student talking to a housing officer about living with a homestay family. First, you have some time to look at questions 1 to 6. Now we shall begin. You should answer the questions as you listen because you will not hear the recording a second time. Listen carefully and answer questions 1 to 6.
Yes, what can I do for you?
My friend is in homestay, and she really enjoys it, so I'd like to join a family as well.
Okay, so let me get some details. What's your name?
My name is Keiko Yuchini.
Could you spell your family name for me?
It's Yuchini. That's Y-U-I-C-H-I-N-I.
And your first name?
It's Keiko. K-E-I-K-O.
That's Keiko Yuchini. Okay. And you're female. And your nationality?
I'm Japanese.
Right. And could I see your passport, please?
Here it is.
Okay. Your passport number is JO6337. And you're how old?
I'm 28 years old.
Now, you live at one of the colleges. Which one?
Willow College, room 21C.
Right, 21C Willow College. And how long are you planning on staying with Homestay?
About 4 months. Longer if I like it.
And what course are you enrolled in?
Well, I've enrolled for 20 weeks in the, Advanced English Studies because I need help with my writing. And I'm nearly at the end of my first 5-week course.
Okay. Do you have any preference for a family with children or without children?
I like young children, but I'd like to be with older people. You know, adults, someone around my age.
Okay. And what about pets?
I am a veterinarian, so that's fine. The more the better.
Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 7 to 10. Now listen and answer questions 7 to 10.
All right. Now, what about you? Are you a vegetarian or do you have any special food requirements?
No, I am not a vegetarian, but I don't eat a lot of meat. I really like seafood.
And what are your hobbies?
I like reading and going to the movies.
Do you play any sports?
Yes, I joined the handball team, but I didn't like that, so I stopped playing. Now I play tennis on the weekend with my friends.
All right. Let's see. Name, age, now the location. Are you familiar with the public transport system?
No, I'm not really because I have been living on campus. I've been to the city a few times on the bus, but they are always late.
What about the trains?
I like catching the train. They are much faster.
Now, let me go check on the computer and see who I've got. Listen, leave it with me. I'll check my records and I'll give you details this afternoon.
Thank you for helping me.
It's a pleasure. Bye.
Bye.
That is the end of section 1. You now have half a minute to check your answers. Now turn to section 2. Section 2. You will hear a man giving a talk to new members of a wildlife club in the south of England. First, you have some time to look at questions 11 to 13. Now listen carefully and answer questions 11 to 13.
Hello, I'm delighted to welcome you to our wildlife club and very pleased that you're interested in the countryside and the plants and creatures of this area. I think you'll be surprised at the variety we have here, even though we're not far from London. I'll start by telling you about some of the parks and open spaces nearby. One very pleasant place is Halland Common. This has been public land for hundreds of years, and what you'll find interesting is that the River Ouse, which flows into the sea 80 kilometres away, has its source in the common. There's an information board about the plants and animals you can see here, and, by the way, the common is accessible 24 hours a day. Then there's Holt Island, which is noted for its great range of trees. In the past, willows were grown here commercially for basket making, and this ancient craft has recently been reintroduced. The island is only open to the public from Friday to Sunday because it's quite small, and if there were people around every day, much of the wildlife would keep away. From there, it's just a short walk across the bridge to Longfield Country Park. Longfield has a modern replica of a farm from over 2,000 years ago. Children's activities are often arranged there, like bread making and face painting. The park is only open during daylight hours, so bear that in mind if you decide to go there.
Before you hear the rest of the talk, you have some time to look at questions 14 to 20. Now listen and answer questions 14 to 20.
Longfield Park has a programme of activities throughout the year, and to give you a sample, this is what's happening in the next few days. On Monday, you can learn about herbs and how they've been used over the centuries. You'll start with a tour of our herb garden, practice the technique of using them as colour dyes for cloth, and listen to an illustrated talk about their use in cooking and medicine. Then on Wednesday, you can join local experts to discover the variety of insects and birds that appear in the evening. We keep to a small number of people in the group, so if you want to go, you'll need to phone the park ranger a few days ahead. There's a small charge which you should pay when you turn up. I'm sure you're all keen to help with the practical task of looking after the park. So on Saturday, you can join a working party. You'll have a choice of all sorts of activities, from planting hedges to picking up litter, so you'll be able to change from one to another when you feel like it. The rangers will be hard at work all day, but do come and join in, even for just a short while. One thing, though, is to make sure you're wearing something that you don't mind getting dirty or torn. And finally, I'd like to tell you about our new wildlife area, Hinchingbrook Park, which will be opened to the public next month. This slide doesn't really indicate how big it is, but anyway, you can see the 2 gates into the park and the main paths. As you can see, there's a lake in the northwest of the park with a bird hide to the west of it at the end of a path, so it'll be a nice, quiet place for watching the birds on the lake. Fairly close to where refreshments are available, there's a dog walking area in the southern part of the park, leading off from the path. And if you just want to sit and relax, you can go to the flower garden. That's the circular area on the map, surrounded by paths. And finally, there's a wooded area in the western section of the park, between 2 paths. OK, that's enough from me, so let's get on and have a look.
That is the end of section 2. You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turn to section 3. Section 3. You will hear 2 students discussing a geography presentation they're going to give. First, you have some time to look at questions 21 to 26. Now listen carefully and answer questions 21 to 26.
Remind me, Trevor, how long is the presentation?
Dr. White said 3 per hour.
So about 20 minutes.
Well, it'll be 15 minutes per presentation.
And 5 minutes for questions?
And is this one going to be assessed?
No, not this time round, because it's the first one, you know.
Oh, good news.
Well, Trevor, what are we going to include?
Well, do you think we ought to give some historical background?
Oh, no, definitely not. We won't have time.
OK, but I think we ought to say something about the geographical location, because not a lot of people know where the islands are.
Yes, OK. I'll take notes, shall I?
Yeah, that'd be a help.
So, geographical location?
Then we ought to give an overview of the whole education system.
Shouldn't we say something about the economy? You know, agricultural produce, minerals and so forth?
Well, Dr. White said we shouldn't go into that sort of detail.
But it's pretty important when you think about it, you know, because it does influence the education system.
Look, let's think about that one later, shall we? Let's see how we're doing for time.
OK, so general overview of education.
Of course. And then the role of English language.
No, that goes in the language policy seminar, don't you remember?
Are you sure?
Positive.
All right. So those are the topics we're going to be covering.
Mm-hmm.
Before you hear the rest of the discussion, you have some time to look at questions 27 to 30. Now listen and answer questions 27 to 30.
We need to think about what to prepare. Dr. White said he wanted us to use plenty of visuals and things, and we might as well try them out when we're not being assessed.
Well, the most important thing is the overhead projector.
No problem. We'll get that from the media room. Must remember to book it.
Well, we'll need a map, of course.
Probably two. One of the islands, large scale.
And one of West Africa.
Well, the West African one is no problem. There's one in the resources room.
Oh, yeah, of course, the resources room. The islands are going to be more of a problem.
Tell you what, there's a very clear map of Santiago in that tourist brochure I showed you last week. Don't you remember it?
Oh, yeah, that's right. We can just use the tourist brochure.
We also need statistics on several different things.
Literacy rates.
Yes, and school places.
How about the encyclopedia?
Nah, not up to date enough.
Why don't we call the embassy?
Oh, someone's enthusiastic.
Well, if something's worth doing...
I know, it's worth doing well. OK.
We can find out statistics on school places from them as well.
Might as well.
Look, Julie, it's almost time for our tutorials. We can meet again on Monday, but we need to prepare some stuff before then.
That is the end of section 3. You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turn to section 4. Section 4. You will hear the beginning of a lecture about business cultures. First, you have some time to look at questions 31 to 40. Now listen carefully and answer questions 31 to 40.
Good morning, everyone. Now, whether you're going to university to study business or some other subject, many of you will eventually end up working for a company of some kind. Now, when you first start working somewhere, you will realize that the organization you've joined has certain characteristics. And we often refer to these social characteristics as the culture of the organization. This includes its unwritten ideas, beliefs, values, and things like that. One well-known writer has classified company cultures by identifying 4 major types. The first type is called the power culture, and it's usually found in small organizations. It's the type of culture that needs a central source of power to be effective. And because control is in the hands of just 1 or 2 people, there aren't many rules or procedures. Another characteristic is that communication usually takes the form of conversations rather than, say, formal meetings or written memos. Now, one of the benefits of this culture is that the organization has the ability to act quickly. So it responds well to threat or danger on the one hand, and opportunity on the other. But on the negative side, this type of organization doesn't always act effectively, because it depends too much on 1 or 2 people at the top, and when these people make poor decisions, there's no one else who can influence them. And the kind of person who does well in this type of business culture is one who is happy to take risks, and for whom job security is a low priority. The next type is known as role culture. That's R-O-L-E, not R-O-L-L, by the way. And this type is usually found in large companies, which have lots of different levels in them. These organizations usually have separate departments that specialize in things like finance or sales or maintenance or whatever. Each one is coordinated at the top by a small group of senior managers, and typically everyone's job is controlled by sets of rules and procedures. For example, there are specific job descriptions, rules for discipline, and so on. What are the benefits of this kind of culture? Well, firstly, because it's found in large organizations, its fixed costs, or overheads as they're known, are low in relation to its output or what it produces. In other words, it can achieve economies of scale. And secondly, it is particularly successful in business markets where technical expertise is important. On the other hand, this culture is often very slow to recognize the need for change, and even slower to react. What kind of person does this type of culture suit? Well, it suits employees who value security and who don't particularly want to have responsibility. Moving on now to task cultures. This type is found in organizations that are project-oriented. You usually find it where the market for the company's product is extremely competitive, or where the products themselves have a short lifespan. Usually, top management delegates the projects, the people, and other resources, and once these have been allocated, little day-to-day control is exercised from the top, because this would seem like breaking the rules. Now, one of the major benefits of this culture is that it's flexible, but it does have some major disadvantages too. For instance, it can't produce economies of scale or great depth of expertise. People who like working in groups or teams prefer this type of culture. And finally, the fourth category is called the person culture. This type is quite unusual.
That is the end of section 4. You now have half a minute to check your answers.